Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Random House Summer Reads. This is the second event in our virtual Random House Summer Read series, and we are so excited for tonight's conversation on our favorite topic, discovering fantastic books. I am honored to introduce our moderator for this evening, Grace Atwood. Grace Atwood is the founder of the lifestyle blog, The Stripe. She's also the co-host of the Bad on Paper podcast. She's a lifelong bookworm who grew up in Cape Cod and currently resides in Brooklyn with her cat, Tyrion. Follow her on Instagram at Grace Atwood, and now, may I present Grace Atwood and Random House Summer Reads.
Hi. I am so excited to be here. I'm going to start by announcing and introducing all four of our amazing authors. We're going to start with Lauren Wilkinson. Lauren actually came on my podcast a little over a year ago to talk about her book, American Spy. So Lauren is, again, the author of American Spy and has taught writing at Columbia and FIT. She was a 2013 Center for Fiction Emerging Writers Fellow and has also received support from the MacDowell Colony and the Jurassic Residence Artist Program. She lives on the Lower East Side, and this was her first novel, which I find very impressive. If you've read the book, it's incredible. It's a masterpiece.
Hi.
Next, I'm going to introduce Diksha Basu. Diksha is a writer and occasional actor. She is originally from New Delhi. She has a BA in economics from Cornell. She has her master's in creative writing from Columbia, and she currently splits her time between New York and Mumbai. And she is the author of Destination Wedding. Next up, we have Kate Stayman-London. Kate is a novelist. She wrote One to Watch. She's a screenwriter and a political strategist. She was actually the lead digital writer for Hillary Clinton's 2016 election and has written for notable figures, so many notable figures, ranging from everyone from Obama to Anna Wintour. She lives in LA and loves wine and reality TV. Oh my God, you guys, I knew this was going to happen. He wants to be the star. This is not part of the panel. And last, but certainly not least, is Victor LaValle. Victor is the author of 6 works of fiction and wrote The Changeling. He has received a Guggenheim Fellowship. He's received an American Book Award, a Shirley Jackson Award, and the Key to Southeast Queens. He lives in New York with his wife and kids and teaches at Columbia. There's a lot of Columbia going on in this group.
Yeah.
Hello.
So I would love it if each of you could quickly give us the elevator pitch for your novel. Why don't we start with Victor, since I introduced you last?
Sure. So my novel is called The Changeling. It's a modern day fairy tale that takes place in New York City. And I guess it's a fairy tale about marriage, parenting, and all the things that can go wrong with those two phases of life, and the occasional thing that can go right about those two phases of life.
Lauren, how about you?
Yeah, my book, American Spy, is about Marie Mitchell. She's a Black female FBI agent from New York who's recruited for a CIA operation. She's asked to help destabilize the government of a real-life Marxist leader, Thomas Sankara. And the book explores her struggle to reconcile her assignment with her background and her values, and also her desire to be a good mother to her 2 young sons.
Diksha?
Yeah, Grace, first of all, I just want to say that this question brings me so much anxiety because it's like having to pick a favorite child because there's just so much I have to leave out. So just very quickly, a very short elevator ride, maybe only up to the 4th floor. My book is about people from all over the world, some Indians, many not, who come together in New Delhi for 1 week at a big, lavish Indian wedding and all of the sometimes ill-advised things that they do over the course of the week.
I'm currently reading your book, and there's a lot of ill-advised things. I love it so far. It's great.
Thank you.
And Kate, how about you?
Yeah, so my book, One to Watch, is a romantic comedy about a devastatingly stylish plus-size blogger named B. Schumacher who has turned upside down when she's asked to be the new star of her favorite romance reality show, Main Squeeze, with 25 men competing for her affection. But there's just one problem, which is B is getting over a massively broken heart. So she says she'll do the show to advance her career, but under one condition: she absolutely refuses to fall in love.
And I want you guys to tell me about the process of making and editing that elevator pitch, because I've read all 4 of your books. Diksha, I'm about 60% through yours. And they're all very complex. How did you go about that? Let's start with Kate.
Yeah, well, so actually I got my master's degree in screenwriting at USC, and I took a whole class in pitching because pitching is a big part of what you do when you're a screenwriter selling movies and shows and stuff. So I have that advantage. But one to watch, I think, pitches well because it's such a premisey book. So that sort of notion of a plus size bachelorette is easy to grab onto. And then I'm also lucky in that one of my dear friends, Morgan Matson, is an amazing novelist who also worked in publishing. So she helped me really workshop the text that became the text on the back of the book, but also what I use for that elevator pitch. So with a lot of help is my answer.
Lauren?
Yeah, I have the same anxiety that Diksha says, like that Diksha has. I had to have someone else write it. So like my first elevator pitch was just what was on the back of the book. And then just, having to summarize it so many times, someone else, a friend of mine, just wrote something down. I was like, oh, that's good. I'm taking that. But it's really hard to do it about your own. I find it really hard to summarize my own thing.
Yeah, I bet. How about you, Victor?
Well, I would say, luckily for me, the Changeling is 3 years old, came out in 2017. So I've had a chance to have readers tell me what the book is about. And it's not always what I thought the book was about. But after a while, hearing it enough times, I started to understand what was really sticking with people on the most basic level. And that was like marriage, parenting, the internet, monsters, like that.
Yeah.
The book is very scary.
Oh, good. I'm happy to hear it. Thank you for saying so.
I could not read it before bedtime. I found myself having weird dreams, but I loved it.
Thanks. The highest compliment you could give me is that it gave you weird dreams.
You were successful. Diksha, how about you? We've given you some time to think because I know you're already inducing some anxiety.
I know, I guess I already gave my answer away to that. I do it by getting really nervous and also saying as little as I can, because otherwise I'll keep going back and saying, oh, I can't believe I left that out. So saying as little as I can, and that little bit I pick up by, like Lauren and Victor touched upon, listening to my editor and my agent mostly speak about the book, or everyone at Random House and Valentine as they work on putting together the materials for the book. I steal little bits and pieces back.
We're gonna talk about the editing process next. I've never written a book, so I'm so incredibly curious about this. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
I did not care for it, the editing process. People writing a book, that's like where the book, that's where the book is written, is in the editing process. But yes, it is definitely, I found it to be an excruciating process. I sold a book, I sold a draft. I signed the contract on American Spy, and I thought, okay, in a year, this baby will be out on shelves. It took me 7 years of editing. So I was, it was 7 kind of grueling years to get it to a place where, I could actually, that they were actually willing, Random House was willing to print it. So yeah, editing was tough.
Wow. Diksha, how about you?
Yeah, editing is, I also struggle with it. So for The Windfall, which was the book, that was my first book with Random House, that was a collection of short stories that I was working on at Columbia that eventually became a book. Destination Wedding was very different. I was editing along the way because I had sold it since I'd already had a working relationship with my editor, I sold it based on a sample few chapters and a vague outline. And so I worked very closely with my editor, Hillary, who's fantastic and really holds my hand through the whole process, as well as my agent, Adam Eglin. They both really do. They know how to give me advice and how to give me feedback. They know how much to say so that I don't get so upset that I turn away from the manuscript forever, but also to just not blindly praise my work so that I actually listen and know what to incorporate. So fortunately, since this was my second time working with them, we've all developed a good working relationship where I know when I need help and they know what help to give me at that point. So I really lean on them very heavily for when it comes to my editing process. So I'm talking about, of course, later stage editing. So I'm talking about once I've got the full draft done where I'm happy with it and then I'm ready for someone else to look at. Because I think for me, that's the more interesting question, is when it becomes collaborative, because so much of it is so deeply solitary that I find it interesting to see how it changes when there's other people who are involved, which fortunately for me are two people who I rely on and trust a lot. So if that answers, I don't know which part of the editing process you were most interested in hearing about. That's the part that interests me the most.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Victor, you've written 6 books. Talk to us about your editing process. Has it changed over the course of your different works?
Luckily for me, all but my very first book have been with the same editor, an editor named Chris Jackson, who is amazing. And one of the reasons he's amazing is because, so I write, especially my more recent books, work that has a fantastical elements in them, and he hates those things. Like he does not believe in those things at all. He doesn't find it fun or interesting. Like he doesn't immediately enjoy that stuff. And in a way, that's the best audience for me, because he doesn't buy into, like if I just say, oh, they just find a bag with a talking head inside, I don't know, something like that, he would say, well, who made the talking head bag? You know, like he'll ask the questions that would allow a person who's a more grounded reader to find a way in. And I really benefit from that kind of a skeptical reader.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kate, what about you? And my follow-up question is, editing your book versus writing for Hillary.
Definitely more cooks in the kitchen when you write for Hillary Clinton than when you write a novel. And in fact, there are, I think, a couple of people in the audience who have edited work that I've written for Secretary Clinton, so maybe they can answer those questions. But for the book, I was like Diksha, I sold it on proposal, so I had only written 3 chapters, and I had written a pretty detailed outline of the whole book. And I find the first draft sort of being by myself to be the most harrowing part of the process, where I sort of have to make, and like, you can make any decision, anything can happen. I'm a Libra, I get very caught up in like, oh no, too many choices. And then once I'm going back and forth with my editor, I kind of like that part of the process better. Particularly, my editor is really great about kind of never letting me sort of sneak by with anything. If I'm like in one particular scene, like, oh, you know, I'll figure that joke out later, or that emotional logic doesn't really make sense, but I'll just leave it in there. She always calls me on it in a way that like, I tend to be my own harshest critic. And so like when she is telling me that she agrees with me on something, it's like, okay, I know I really need to fix this. Or like, I'll write her a panicked email at 3 a.m. being like, I need to change the entire middle 6 chapters. And she's like, no, you don't, they're good. So I need that kind of reinforcement to be able to not be my own worst enemy in the writing process. So I really like having that partner to sort of help me kind of know what's real as I'm figuring out how to make the book better.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question is something we always ask authors on our podcast when we have them on, is we want the details of your writing process, like any routines that you have. Are you listening to music? Are you eating a snack? Are you drinking a beverage? Are you in quiet? Is it loud? Is it crazy? Talk to me about that. Let's start with Victor.
Well, mine is actually pretty simple. It's a routine that developed once my wife and I had once she had our kids. I write 2 hours a day from 10 to 12, and then I stop. And that was a routine that began when our first son was an infant, because 2 hours away was the longest either of us could be away before the house fell apart. And so I learned how to just get everything done in 2 hours. because the kids aren't going to care that I need time to work on my art for the rest of the day. And it actually served me really well to just be like, hit it during those 2 hours, and then just go on with the rest of life, the rest of the day. And of course, all of that is gone during this pandemic, but someday I will get back to it.
Yes, I can't imagine. Diksha, how about you?
I'm glad you asked me after Victor, because I feel really happy to hear that I think I'm following in his footsteps, because I have two extremely small children. One is 1.5 and one is just turned 3. So I have two very young kids. And again, because of the pandemic, almost no childcare. So I write right now, and I think I need to try Victor's way next. I write sort of spaced out through the day in a way by continuously being everywhere and nowhere, which can be very disappointing, but also at the same time, it sort of keeps me in my work continuously. And again, this keeps changing because everything's up in the air right now. I'm not in my usual setting with my usual childcare setup. So it's, I have no routine, no ritual. I write when I can. I've been trying to change that a little bit, listening to people talk, saying, especially relatively new mothers saying, wake up early, wake up early, wake up before the house wakes up. And that's not something I've ever done in the past. I really struggled to wake up early, but recently, as in literally the last 2 weeks, I've been trying to get up earlier and earlier, but I think my 3-year-old senses it. So 10 minutes, 15 minutes after I finally get a cup of coffee and sit down at my desk, I hear little footsteps coming through the house. So right now I have, I write whenever I can, as much as I can. It's not that much. I'm hoping that I will find my rhythm in what seems to be the new normal, but it's as much as I can, whenever I can. It's my only idea, only routine.
That seems quite like it makes sense during the pandemic. Kate, how about you?
Yeah, well, the most important question you asked was the one about beverages, which is, I have like a very strategic Zoom shot happening here, but it's like a full LaCroix graveyard happening on my desk next to me. It's like, and it's like, I have this, but like, I can never not have a seltzer in my hand. I go through a really obscene amount of it on a weekly basis. I like to try ideally to get up and write first thing in the morning, just like pour myself a glass of cold brew and oat milk. Yes, I do live in Los Angeles, and like caffeinate as much as I can and get out as many pages for the day as I can. Sometimes that works, lots of times it doesn't, and I don't have kids or really a lot else to keep me on target. So usually what'll happen is it'll be like 2 weeks before my deadline, and then I'll start writing all day, every day until the draft is done. So really, but I think it's really important to like give yourself that time to not be writing, because I really find that the way I solve story problems is to think about something else and just like kind of let it percolate on the back burner as much as I can. And then when I come back to it, like some good idea will occur to me that wouldn't have if I had just sat at the computer, like trying to get it out of me. So, you know, it's definitely procrastination, but I do think it makes the work better. So I'll probably just keep doing it that way.
I think that also makes a lot of sense. And I am also a seltzer addict, so I can relate to that one.
Yeah. I think that, you know, your routine, it like reflects the nature of how your life is. So I don't know, the first time that I, like with my book, I was single. So I was waking up at like 4 in the morning and kind of writing all day and sitting or saying I was writing all day, although it was probably wasn't being that efficient with my time. You know, I'd be on Twitter for like 3 hours and then like, I look up and realize that I hadn't really written a word. But, you know, now I live with someone. I can't do that. Like I can't just wake up so early. My time is, you know, it's inconsiderate to somebody else. And then hearing, you know, the two panelists with kids, like that's something that, you know, I think will be a consideration when I'm writing my next book. So I'm really interested to see how my routine will change and what it will look like. Cause I can't tell. I feel like I'd like to be a writer who can write very, you know, just be like, okay, this is 2 hours that you have and just get it finished. But like for a long time, I've been someone who like needs to know that I have a long period of time, even if I'm not going to be using it. So I gotta kind of figure out a way to change that. or
I'm the same way. I don't know how you change that. I don't know. Good job. You guys who can do it. I don't know how to do it.
it's hard.
Well, I would throw out there, it wasn't a choice.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only thing I would put out there. It really was not like willpower. It was not. So
Like it's just
don't
you do
give.
it or perish, you know. So
That's it. That's it.
What is everyone reading right now?
I'm reading No Heaven for Good Boys by Keisha Bush, which is a Random House title. I'm reading it because I'm blurbing it, but enjoying it. So that's good.
I'm pulling in another. Sorry, Lauren, I didn't mean to
No, I
cut
was
you
just
off.
gonna say it's set in Senegal, and it's about like a little boy who comes to the city from his village. It's a nice thing to read, and it's nice to read at this time, like where I'm just like, if for me focusing on something other than my mounting anxiety, it's really nice. I do a lot of doom scrolling, so kind of shutting down Twitter and turning to a book is a nice way to take care of myself. So yeah.
Diksha?
Yeah, I'm actually continuing the Columbia connection of this evening, and I'm reading Sanai Lamont, who was my classmate, The Margot Affair, also a Random House title. She's just, the first the beginnings of this book I had read in workshop at Columbia, and I get to sort of revisit it now in a final full novel form, and it's just, she's a really beautiful, honest writer, and it's just really, it's a fantastic book. And I'm also hoping to start soon, but I haven't yet, is What We Carry by Maya Shanbag Lang, which is a memoir about her dealing with her mother's Alzheimer's diagnosis. So
I would say two books that I kind of recently finished up was a novel called Mexican Gothic by a writer named Silvia Moreno Garcia, which is a Gothic novel set in Mexico. And then it's amazing. And another one called The Only Good Indians by a writer named Stephen Graham Jones, and that's set on Blackfeet territory in the U.S. And it's, if you remember Peter Straub's Ghost Story, but in Blackfeet territory is the closest way I could describe it. They're both great spooky novels that you can sort of fall into and love.
I know Grace is doing this too, but I've been reaching for a lot of books that bring me joy because I feel that we need that now. So I've been reading a lot of rom-coms this summer, and I recently read Party of Two by Jasmine Guillory, who's just one of my favorite people, and I love the book so much. And it was like politics but nice, which is like personally very good for me. And now I'm reading Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert, who is just like, she's such a good writer. It's just like the prose just grabs you in such a way. And I'm also listening to audiobooks, which I've never done in my life, but something about the pandemic and having time and taking walks when it's not too hot, I really like doing. And I'm listening to the audiobook of Call Me By Your Name, which is read by Armie Hammer. And I would say it's an aggressive thing to do to yourself when you've been by yourself for 5 months in a row to listen to that book read by Armie Hammer, but it is a good audiobook and I recommend it.
Actually, Kate, your book is also, I meant to say this, your book is also on my bedstand because my publicist sent it to me last week, so I'm very excited.
Oh my, same with your book. So this is great. All the joy.
Love it. What would you guys each say that your ideal summer read would be? Like, I guess genre-wise. Kate, why don't you start?
Well, obviously, I love a romantic comedy, but I have to say I've been struggling this summer because I really love in the summer to kind of get to somewhere dark and rainy. I love a summer storm. I grew up on the East Coast. I really miss thunderstorms. And so to me, to be holed up and reading a spookier novel and kind of a dark storm in the summer is my absolute ideal. But instead it's just bright and sunny here every day. And it's like I have Catherine House sitting on my nightstand and it's just like never the right weather that I actually want to read it. So I'm hopefully at some point I can get out of LA and get to the right weather for that kind of read.
Yeah.
Summers, I find I mean, almost every season I enjoy something that's a little bit frightening. But particularly in the summer, another book I read recently was The Ancestor by Danielle Trussoni, which takes place in like the Alps and on the Italian side. And for lack of a better term, is all about like all the things you might not have known about the abominable snowman, I suppose is the way I would put it. And I really loved it because it made me feel cooler with every page as I sat through the summer.
I don't know, it's hard to say. Like, I never really associate like seasons with a particular type of book, but someone in the chat just said that they notice that they're reading less because they're, commuting less, and that they did a lot of the reading on the subway, and I identify with that. I did a lot of reading on the subway, and I didn't realize that I would miss that kind of thing until now that it's gone. I miss it. I miss running errands and doing like chores in this weird time. But yeah, I guess not summer, but commute oriented books.
Yeah. Diksha?
Oh, sorry. In my mind, I thought I had answered, but I think I was sitting here thinking about it, and I because of the pandemic, time has sort of shape-shifted for me, and I've lost track of seasons. And I've been living for the last 2 years in Bombay, which has 2 seasons, and that's hot or wet, and that's about it. So being back in a country with distinct seasons is disorienting. So, but generally, I'm finding my what I'm looking for in pandemic readings is similar to what I tend to look for in the summer readings, which is the big books, the expansive books that have generations, have lots of different storylines, often ideally settings that are not anywhere near where I currently am. All of that is what I look for when I think of summer read, and maybe that's just because I've been really well marketed to over the past several years. I don't know, summer reads is such a distinct thought, but really for me right now, between the pandemic and this weird association with time, anything that allows me to escape reality for as long as possible.
Yeah, that actually reminds me, my uncle has been reading 100 Years of Solitude every summer for the last 25 years. That is like the most detailed about.
That's like, a whole mood.
He'll read it on a vacation in summer, and he'll only get through the first couple of chapters. And then when he goes back to it, he, instead of just like continuing on, he's like, I don't want anything to happen. So he starts it over again. And he was like, I'm going to read your book. I was like, okay, yeah, after you read 100 Years of Solitude. So, I'm not holding my breath on getting to mine anytime soon. But
that's amazing.
That's so great. I would love to hear from each of you what is next. And then I have a whole phone full of reader questions. So we're going to do that. Lauren, what's next for you?
I was in LA, like Kate. I've been working in TV for the last year, and now I am developing a pilot based on a classic novel. I don't want to say which one because it's TV and it can all fall apart in an instant, and I'll have talked about it in public and it's all gone away. So, but I really like this. I like this kind of writing. I thought maybe I wouldn't be very good at writing for the screen because it is like more transparent. It feels like, it's visual, so you can't really hide any stuff in your narrative. But yeah, I've really been enjoying it, and enjoying also working in writers' rooms because it's it's the opposite. It's not so solitary. It's much more collaborative. You're sitting there with a bunch of people talking about the thing that I like to talk about most, which is telling stories. So nice.
Kate, how about you?
Yeah, I have so many different projects. I'm not allowed to talk about any of them, but I can say I have a few different TV and film projects happening that I'm really, really excited about. And like Lauren, they could all, fall apart at any moment. And then working on another book that I'm not allowed to talk about either, but I'm very, very excited about it.
Oh, Lucian.
Victor, me.
The next thing that I'm definitely working on is a novel that's supposed to come out next year. That's a novel about lone women homesteaders in Montana in 1915, when women were allowed to, like legally were able to claim land without a man's cosign, anything like that. And so it's 4 women who go out alone. Another thing people may not know about that time is that racially it was actually, essentially they were so desperate to have non-Native Americans on that land that they opened up the racial requirements so that Black women could own the land, white women could own the land, Chinese women could not, because that was the group who was hated there. But all these different kinds of women come to this one part of Montana, plus there's something monstrous out there.
Oh, I knew there had to be
There
something.
had to be a monster somewhere.
Oh my God, that sounds so good.
Yeah.
Can't wait to do that.
Yeah.
You're letting me know the elevator pitch is working.
Diksha, how about you?
I'm adding to the secretive, vague screen project, and I'll leave it at that. But I'm also working finally on another novel. I have started and I was quite deep into another novel when the pandemic hit, and then it made no sense to me because I didn't know what world I was writing about or what world I was writing for. And so I just put aside what I was working on and felt it added to my anxiety and my depression with everything that's happening in the world. But then recently, just maybe 2 or 3 months ago, again, time is confusing, but 2 months ago, I feel I'm finally starting to find my way into another novel.
I can't wait to hear more about it once it's no longer a secret. I'm not.
No, Hollywood is so dumb. You'll sell a project and like a year and a half later, you ask the press people, like, can I tell anyone about this yet? And they're like, oh, no. And you're like, because, and they're like, because you can't. So, okay.
Okay, I have a whole bunch of questions for you guys. Oh, this is a good one. After writing in a day, how do you turn your brains off concerning the character work, or are the characters and plot running through your heads all day?
I think that's always something in the background, like a computer, like, the CPU. I think that's actually important. That's like kind of half the work, like, is kind of figuring out the story. The same also, honestly, when I'm asleep, because I must be, because sometimes I wake up and I'm like, oh, okay, like, I think this is where I want to go. And that's probably why I like to write the most in the morning. So yeah, they're always, you're always trying to figure it out. Some portion of my brain is always trying to figure out stories when I'm supposed to be present with my loved ones.
Yeah.
I'm focused on, trying to figure out why someone I'm making up is behaving as they do.
Yeah, I'll tell a story that is sort of along the same lines of what Lauren's talking about, that idea of like the brain is always, the writer brain is always working. I think this is a funny story. So my wife is also a writer, and she gave birth to our kids at home. And when she was giving birth to our second kid,
And you're similar to in the book.
I mean, I make up almost nothing in my writing. Yes. So so although in the book it didn't take place in the apartment event finally, so that was the difference.
True.
Yeah. But so she gives birth. This is particularly to our second child, and the midwife comes a week later to check, weigh the baby, make sure everything's going well, and she says to us, I noticed something, like when the baby was coming out and you were holding the baby, I noticed something about the two of you. It's like, you were happy, you were there, it was beautiful, but I felt like neither one of you was completely there. And my wife and I both looked at her and we both said we were both taking notes. And I just feel like that is the thing, like the time when you're writing is the least amount of your writing day.
Yeah.
On some day. And that's, maybe that sounds, I don't know how that sounds to some people, but to me, that's part of the beauty of it. But also, as Lauren said, sometimes it's the way that you're not always fully present, even at birth.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I touched on this when I mentioned that that's become my writing style, is sort of, I'm with it all day, even if I'm not actually at my computer. And I find that the more I get involved in the project, the more the characters become people who I can and I like to imagine sitting next to me in any given situation. And I like to get to a point where I would know what they would do in that situation.
Mm. Yeah, I would say too that it's nice, especially like I moved out to LA for grad school. So my first group of friends here was a group of writers because it was a writing program, and that's remained sort of my core circle out here. And it's nice that my social circle is writers too. So if someone's having the story problem or whatever, like it's totally usual and normal for a social gathering to be like, oh, I'm trying to fix this scene where X, Y, and Z is happening, and then everyone will be pitching on it. And it's like, it's fun because, you know, when you're having trouble with your own story, there's nothing better than solving someone else's story, because it's like, oh God, at least it's not my problem, right? And I can just be helpful and generous and it's fine. So I really love that part of it. And yeah, like everyone else, I'm just always, all I've been doing today, literally all day, is trying to name this one character. And so I've just been like on baby name blogs, texting my agent like, Seth? And she's like, no. And I'm like, Greg? And she's like, no. And like, we're just going back and forth trying to name this guy. I don't know what I'm going to name him. It's a nightmare. But yeah, you just think about it all day.
Somebody else asked, Kayla asks, how do you feel about diversity in the publishing industry right now?
For more of it. I mean, I think certainly I don't think it would be controversial to say that it's not diverse enough, and that the way that, like, the other, I guess maybe one other thing I would say is along those lines is like I love looking at, like, just looking at this panel and the variety of folks on this panel who are writers who published our books and all this sort of thing. But one of the ways that you get a diverse group of people who have published the books is you have a diverse group of people who are purchasing the books, right? And who are making those choices. And that strikes me, sometimes the thing that's overlooked is it's not just like the things in front of the camera that have to change. It's the things behind, it's the people behind the camera who decide what's worth focusing on.
Yeah.
And that strikes me as central to any movement forward.
I want to hear from everyone on this question, but I also would like to know, because we have a whole bunch of readers listening right now. Like, what are some things that book readers can be doing to help encourage more diversity in the publishing industry?
I would say ask for it. Like, directly go and ask for it. Look at your favorite book and see who edited it and tweet at the editor and say, who are you buying from right now? Sorry, I obviously come from the political world and direct action and agitation. So I will always, but that's part of, right, like One to Watch is about representation and diversity in reality television. And exactly to Victor's point, there are two inciting incidents of the book. One is that the protagonist, B, kind of goes on this tweet storm about the lack of diversity on the show. But the other is that the man who runs the show is fired and a woman gets his job. And so that woman then says, we're going to have a plus size person be the lead of the show for the first time, right? It's who's behind the camera and making those decisions really matters. So if you think that there needs to be more Native representation or more Black representation or more queer representation, whatever it might be, ask for that, because at the end of the day, what Random House or any other publisher wants to do is sell books, right? And they want to know that the audience is there for what they're trying to sell. So be loud about what it is that you want to see, I would say to readers.
One thing I want to say, which I feel very hopeful about, which for me writing as an Indian woman, is sometimes the conversation around diversity and inclusion, especially as someone who's from India, it's as if being an Indian writer, I'm somehow supposed to be teaching an audience, or if I'm somehow supposed to be explaining India or displaying India in a way that is comfortable, and often it can be either via poverty porn or, you know, whatever sort of the victimhood of India and Indians can be seen as diversity. But what I've been really happy about and really excited about working with Hillary Tiemann and Adam Eglin is the fact that they have encouraged me and given me space to write about the India that I know and that I live in, and to not set out to try and teach a lesson to the West. And I think I want more of that. I don't want books that are written by Indians or any other people of color to be lessons for anybody. I think we should be given our space and be allowed to write without necessarily having to answer this question.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I would just throw out there, like, in general, like, this is a thing that is, I think, applicable to everyone, is every once in a while I just try to ask myself, like, the last 5 books I read, were the authors and the main characters people who looked exactly like me, or were from the place exactly like me, or lived exactly like me? And if they were, that's okay. Of course, people want to read about people who are like them. But like book 6, maybe book 6 through 8, I say, I got to buy a different book. It's just got to be some way different. That's all. And even that can be the beginning, because to Kate's point, it is, we do live in a capitalist society. Like, the way that you can also show what you want in the world is that you spend your money on it. You know what I mean? Or you go to the library and you take it out, whatever works for you. And you read outside of your own experience. And that, I think, is healthy for every human being.
What are some ways that this audience or anyone, any reader in general, can support authors? Like, what are the things that they can do? I know pre-orders is a really big one. What else? Give the people some to-do lists.
I feel like, yeah, this is, it feels like recently, I don't know, this maybe is like a little, like, I think that we have all these problems that people are starting to realize, or that have always been present, but we are no longer able to avoid looking at them. And they're like these very complex, systematic problems, like systemic problems. And then we kind of all want like these solutions that are a little bit more individually based or a little simple, but the problems are so complicated that sometimes it's just like, I'm not even sure if I can, like, if really, I think my most honest answer sometimes is like, I don't know what the answer is. I don't know how, like, for a problem, because like the problem, the reason for the lack of diversity in publishing, for example, is reflective of a larger systemic problem in this country about, race, related to race and class. Like, so, how do I, and as an individual, how do any of us really deal with that kind of thing without reconciling it? How do you really, without reconciling the root problems, how do you support authors? Like my knee-jerk response just now is to be like, never buy anything from Amazon, because it's like such a, like this trickled, like the publishing industry is one of the first industry that they've definitely undersold books on. Like they kind of cut their teeth on how they were going to go about their business model is going to be like, how they are going to go about undermining other industries, like, so they can have, so they can have a monopoly, and so they can sort of destroy it. I don't know. Like, how do you support authors? I guess, like, the way that I would love to be supported is if I was able to write a novel and it was like still the 1950s, and that could be like, a salary that could support, a family. Like, but I don't know how we do that anymore. I mean, I'm sorry if this was like, I feel like I came in real hot in the beginning of that. I don't like, I'm not like a hostile way at all. It's just like, I just have been like thinking about it. And
it's 2020. That's the only way you can come into anything.
Like, a lot of people are like, oh, this is like, how do we do this? Here's the solution. And I'm like, but I probably the solution isn't, the size of a tweet, probably it's not like, the solution probably isn't something that we can like buy, but like how we need to like start really reconsidering things. And I don't know. I am feeling hot about it, because like there are things I want to do as well to kind of be, just to be a better person, to be like, more helpful person in this really, really tough world that we find ourselves living in. So yeah, I want to give answers, but I'm struggling, to have them for myself. So
I want to give one really simple, small thing to not do, which is, if you really don't like the book, don't tag us.
Oh my God.
Feels like common sense, but
you would think,
people do
but
it.
turns
People
out
do
it's
it.
not. Yeah.
God. I don't understand it.
Yeah, and they'll argue with you about like why it's okay to do that. It's like,
Yeah, you don't need constructive criticism of a published book to directly to the author.
Yeah, so it's done.
You know, I would say, bouncing off Lauren's, one of the points in there, I think that is a help, when I imagine helping an author, is a help to many authors, is to take her point and say, just like, if you just would buy from independent bookstores, right? Like that would be a thing that would help every single author here and tens of thousands of authors not here, regardless of whether it's even buying any book by any of us. Just to have bookstores, independent bookstores existing in the world is a gift to, I would say, to the world, but certainly to writers. You know.
Yeah.
One thing I've heard from readers that I hadn't heard before, and I think it's not the same as a book club, is a buddy read. I don't know if you guys like know this term, and it's a really familiar thing. I'm just seeing it for the first time this summer. But it's like readers are tagging me on Instagram and be like, oh, my friend organized this buddy read and 5 of us read One to Watch, and that's why I bought it, and da-da-da. And so I think if there are particularly authors, non-white authors especially, who you are wanting to support, and you can organize a group of your friends to all read and buy the book from an independent bookseller, or reach out to your family about it. In politics, we would call this social pressure, and it's also an effective tactic to get people to vote, if you're wondering. So you can use it for that too, but no reason not to use it to get your friends and family to all be buying books, either specific books or just books in general, from independent booksellers.
Absolutely. And somebody just wrote in the questions, and I can answer this because I'm sure I know the answer. But they said, do they order the books using the links in the chat or from their local indie bookstore? Get them from your indie bookstore. The links are just to give you everything in one easy place. Oh, this is a good question that just came in. So with so much diversity in your books, do you have any dream actors to play the main characters if your books were to turn into movies or TV shows? Either one.
So one, I would throw out there to echo everyone else. I guess I can't say more, but I know specifically the dream actor to play Apollo, the character from The Changeling. And we're going to find out very soon if he will. So that would be really nice. That's probably, I'm sure, as Kay said, I'm going to get an email very soon from a press person. But I feel like I didn't say anybody's name, but I can say that much.
Yeah.
And
I'm going to say it. I'm putting myself out there, and I think this should fall into Priyanka Chopra's hands. Destination Wedding. I think she is straddling Bollywood and Hollywood, East and West, and tackling so many of those questions of identity and home and movement around the world that my character in the book also tackles. And one of the things that I actually really like that Priyanka Chopra does, and I know a lot of people, especially Indians, are very dismissive of it, and I do this too, is she changes her accent according to her audience. And I think that's brilliant, and I think that's as skillful as having another language, especially when you are from as accented in English as Indians speak, and as accented English as Americans speak. To be able to juggle the two and go back and forth between the two is like having 2 different languages. And that's something that I think about, I put into practice, and comes up in my book, and Priyanka Chopra does very well.
Yeah.
Wait, now follow up to that for you. Would you leave in the Priyanka Chopra references and have it be very Priyanka?
She can decide.
She's the first show that I was on. She's one of the leads. So she's
Well,
doing
Lauren.
The connection.
She's very talented, and
Yes.
I think
Have a word, yeah.
I wish I was in the position, but if I know, maybe there's like 6 degrees of separation, I'll be like, hey, I would, pass this along.
Send her the link for this chat.
That's right.
Yeah. Anyone who has really wanted to play it, who looks, like people, like Victor and Kate were saying, they give you like a list of people who might be interested or whatever, and I don't know. Someone had asked in the chat, you know, are your books under option? Yes, my book is under option, and the production company, you know, has a list of people who maybe would be a lead, and I'm happy with all of them. The one weird thing is a British company, so it might be a British actor for a book called American Spy, but you know, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
If they can work the accent out, then.
And yeah, and British, they really, you know, the British actors really surprise you when you hear them speak on, like, you know, Conan or whatever, and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Didn't realize you weren't American.
Although I just found out, this is a deep cut for like 5 people on here probably, but I just found out that the guy who plays Spike on Buffy is not British in real life, and it ruined me. I'm so angry. Like, you're American? Go to hell. Like, I'm not interested in that. But yeah, no, so for one to watch, I think my real dream would be, because there are so few leading roles written for fat women, to see like an awesome, fabulous fat actress who hasn't had the opportunity maybe to play a leading role get the chance to have that starring role for the first time and have her breakout moment. That would be really exciting. And I would say also, like, I'm a white author who wrote a white protagonist, but it doesn't have to be that way and look like that as much when you go to the Hollywood side of things. So I would really love to see Bea not be white in the adaptation.
Well, I really hope there's adaptations of all of your books, because I love them all. I think we have time for one more question. Oh, I really like this question too. So after finishing writing a book, do you ever think to yourself, oh, I wonder what this character is doing today? So, like, in a way, do the characters live on for you after you finish the book?
When the pandemic hit and I was in, you know, when we were for like the last 2 weeks in March, when it was just really like, you can't leave your house, no one knows what's happening. It was so scary. One of the things that gave me comfort was I wrote up just like a little 3-page joke for my, you know, my agent, just being like, here's where I think all the characters from One to Watch got stuck during the pandemic and who they're with and what they're doing. And just like, it felt comforting to me to, like, especially because it was in those weird like 3 months right before the book comes out, and that was so stressful, not knowing what the world was going to look like or what was going to happen. So that I liked doing that, and I like to think about like, oh, I wonder what they're thinking today.
I'm gonna need that.
We'll talk after
That
this.
would bring me personally a lot of joy to hear what they're
I would say some books more than others have stayed with me, and even for most of them, it's more like occasionally, you know, kind of thinking of almost like the equivalent of like an old friend or an old a person you used to date, and you just sort of think, I hope they're doing all right. I hope things worked out.
Yeah.
Like, that's usually the way I think. I just hope it's all going well for them, and it's probably best if we don't see each other again.
I just hope that Apollo and Emma don't have any more monsters.
Well, they might have more kids. I don't know. We'll see.
Not really. I mean, you know, I think my book sort of ends on like a cliffhanger in terms of the plot. So when I do think of the main character, I think, you know, what's happening, what would happen if I were to write a sequel. But other than that, I think I'm kind of, you know, moved on, and I'm giving my attention to like trying to build new characters now, which is pretty consuming. You know, you kind of dive into this building this new person, particularly early on. I find it to be so. Yeah, that's where my focus is. Marie is sort of in my rear view mirror now.
I would like a second book about Marie, but you know that already. I already pled for that on the podcast last year.
I'm planning a heist. That's what I want to write now. I want to write a heist.
Oh.
Yeah, I'd like to steal something on the trade. Something good.
Diksha?
Yeah, mine linger for a little while, and then gradually the new characters start to replace them, which is both heartbreaking and freeing. But it takes a while, and I know because in the beginning when I'm trying to work out what I'm working on next and I start to develop my not like I have huge amounts of experience, but when I started to write Destination Wedding and I was sending it to my editor, she was writing back saying, these are still the same characters with new names. So it took me a while to sort of shake them off and really find the actual new ones.
Well, I think that concludes this panel. Thank you guys so much. I learned so much from each of you, and I really loved all of your books. So this was really fun.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thanks for that, and thanks for doing this.
Thank you, guys.
Random House.